Thank you, Ostis, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. I'm delighted to be with you here this morning and to be part of this EEA seminar. I understand you have already received comprehensive briefings by the Secretary General, the Deputy Secretary General, whom I extend a warm welcome to, and the Director of the Internal Market Division. So I suppose it's only a question of what remains to be said. I've been asked to speak about the challenges and the priorities of the EEA EFTA States and in the second half of this year. I suppose there are always bound to be challenges, whether it is upholding the two-pillar structure and finding common solutions to our participation in agencies, or being able to identify important legislation at the very beginning of the legislative process. It rests with all of us to ensure the good functioning of the EEA agreement. The agreement has served us well. It is a stable and predictable framework of relations that brings us closer economically to the EU than any other partner country arrangement. We must continue working at it, and it's important never to take it for granted. And we must stay on our guard against complacency. I was speaking at the University of Iceland recently at the law faculty, and I realized that there is a whole generation of EEA EFTA citizens that have no recollection of life before the EEA, who believe that freely moving and living and studying in the EEA has always been a given. But both sides, EEA EFTA side and the EU, we need therefore to continuously make efforts to nurture it and secure the continuation of knowledge about the EEA and provide the necessary resources to secure the good functioning of the agreement. And I think the importance of this was illustrated during the COVID crisis, where on two occasions the EU side adopted trade restrictive measures on EEA relevant products that did apply to the EEA EFTA states, contrary to the EEA agreement. Just as I was going into COVID, making a point of these restrictive measures that were removed following our efforts. I mean, the point is that the situation was rectified, but it did cause a certain damage, and a certain image damage, let's say. And I wanted to highlight this here because this illustrates the importance of being on guard and to be aware of the EEA angle of important issues like this. And having said this, let me also stress that we have enjoyed extremely good cooperation with the EU throughout the pandemic. We have been integral part of the measures taken, be it in trade or as to Schengen-related issues. Our full participation in IPCR, that is the Integrated Political Crisis Response, has been extremely important, and we continue to participate in that. And in addition, we have been part of the EU's vaccine purchasing and distribution scheme, which has turned out to be a success and quite valuable to us. This was, in a sense, natural because of our partnership in the EEA, where we share a market, have free movement between us, and participate in Schengen. And we are also interested in participating in EU preparedness for future health crisis and to contribute accordingly to such work as deemed appropriate. Thus, we have, for example, already started a preliminary dialogue with the Commission for our participation in HERA, that is the European Health Emergency Preparedness and Response. So overall, we believe that the EEA agreement is fit for purpose and serving us well. Our economic welfare depends on a well-functioning internal market. The positive approach from the EU side on the importance of the agreement and overall on our relationship matters because it feeds directly into the discussion back home and reinforces the work we are doing to strengthen our participation in the EEA. Now, last year, we incorporated over 660 acts into the EEA agreement, which is a fairly good number, and notably includes the new EU programs. This is, of course, a result of our joint efforts and the invaluable contribution of a number of actors, including the Commission, the EEAS, the Council, and the EFTA Secretariat. The EEA partners are continuously seeking ways to incorporate more acts into the agreement to reduce the backlog. And we have now, with our new interlocutors on the EEA, since the beginning of this year, the Secretariat General, placed strong focus on continuing the very good relations we have had with the EEAS. We have already witnessed excellent results and have stressed the importance of ensuring sufficient resources to allow for the continuous incorporation of EEA relevant acts to ensure the homogeneity of the market. Now, the two-pillar structure of the EEA agreement continues to be a solid platform, and we must be vigilant in protecting this structure, because that is a fundamental element for the legitimacy of the agreement in the EEA EFTA States, and I hope someone has had the role to explain the two-pillar structure. Very good. And the point that I wanted to make here, that we have always been successful during the years to find solutions, sometimes creative, to respect the two-pillar system. The history of our EEA cooperation shows that we find solutions to challenges as they arise, and it is certainly our intention to keep working with the EU in that spirit of problem solving and cooperation. Now, before I turn to our priorities for this semester, I want to use the opportunity to share some insight into the work of the Standing Committee, which Iceland is chairing now in the second half of this year. Following that, time permitting, I may briefly take off my EEA EFTA hat and give you a perspective of my own country, Iceland, on the agreement. The main task and, in fact, purpose of the Standing Committee of the three EEA EFTA states is to agree on the decisions we will adopt together with the European Union in the EEA Joint Committee. The three ambassadors of Liechtenstein, Norway, and Iceland, with Switzerland and EFTA Surveillance Authority as observers, we meet about 8 times a year to discuss and agree on a common position that we will present in the meetings of the Joint Committee, EEA Joint Committee, which usually takes place the following day. Today, over 12,000 legal acts have been incorporated into the EEA legal order, of which about 5,000 are no longer in force. And I wanted to highlight that here because I think that illustrates the dynamic nature of the agreement. A key feature of the decision-making process in the EEA is that Liechtenstein, Iceland, and Norway, we need to speak with one voice. And well, this is normally not a challenge since we are like-minded states. However, being 3 independent states, we need to make sure that we always find common ground. And this we do because it is, well, obviously required, but also because there is no denying that in our dealings with the 27 EU member states, unity is indeed a source of strength. And I do believe the European Union has discovered that itself lately. But in this way, we try to compensate for our lack of numbers through better cohesion. At our meetings, we receive and discuss information from the ongoing work of our 5 subcommittees and almost 30 working groups, which I believe have just been presented to you. We also use the fora to exchange views and information about the broader relations with the EU at the political level. And it's important to bear in mind that while the Standing Committee represents the pinnacle of the work we do among the EEA EFTA states, the most intensive and time-consuming part of the work is done outside and between meetings of the committee. And as you have heard earlier, an enormous amount of work is done through the working groups and subcommittees with the excellent support of the Secretariat in the day-to-day management of the EEA agreement. In many ways, therefore, the meetings of this committee can be likened to the tip of an iceberg. Now, while these meetings are quite formal, the importance of the informal contacts between our delegations, the Secretariat, colleagues in capitals, and with our EU counterparts in the Commission, the Presidency and the Council, informal contacts should not be underestimated. It's also important for our 3 missions to have open discussions among ourselves about all outstanding issues, policy-related or practical, be they problems in the making or opportunities to further our cooperation in different fields. Now, turning to the priorities of the Icelandic chairmanship of the Standing Committee during the second half of this year. First, we will prioritize efforts when it comes to incorporation of EEA relevant acts. and reduce the backlog and ensure that the EFTA side deliver a meaningful number of draft joint committee decisions on continuous basis to the EU side. And a particular focus will be given on incorporation of acts in the fields of energy, financial services, transport, statistics, and wine and spirits, where we have identified, well, these are areas, 5 areas that we have identified as where we have a particularly high number of outstanding acts, and we will try and focus on those. Now, reducing the number of joint committee decisions where entry into force is pending due to constitutional requirements is also a point in question, particularly for joint committee decisions where more than 6 months have passed since their adoption. And we will strive to deliver on this during our term. When it comes to influencing EEA relevant legislation, what we call decision shaping, we will continue to identify and provide input to the EU on EEA relevant initiatives and encourage EEA EFTA comments where appropriate and possible. And I say possible because we will have cases where our interests are not the same, and we will perhaps need to individually communicate our concerns to the EU, ideally at various stages before the Commission adopts the relevant proposals. Now, being halfway through the term of the current Commission, the Commission of President von der Leyen, we try and focus on providing input on relevant, let's say, flagship proposals being discussed in Council and the European Parliament, falling under the European Green Deal, Europe Fit for the Digital Age, economy that works for people, and promoting a European way of life, to mention only a few of von der Leyen's sort of flagship policy areas. Now, as mentioned earlier, it is particularly important to identify at an early stage possible two-pillar issues related to major pieces of new EEA relevant legislation, including on the proposal for an AML authority, that's probably Anti-Money Laundering Authority, and the recently adopted Digital Markets Act. Another point we will continue to is that we will continue to strengthen the knowledge of the EEA agreement and financial mechanisms, and make use of the available tools, including this house, the EFTA House, to disseminate information on the EEA. The EEA Council will be hosted for the first time in the EFTA House in November of this year. This will indeed be the first time in history of the EEA agreement that the EFTA side will host this meeting, and we do thank the Secretariat for all the preparations they are undertaking in this regard to secure the successful event taking place in November. We will continue outreach activities undertaken by the Secretariat within the framework of the EFTA working groups and invite EU counterparts to the EFTA House. I understand that this initiative has been extremely successful, and we of course encourage the Secretariat to continue its work with the working groups in this regard. In addition to this seminar we are holding today, we are planning to organize a special event on energy and energy security. Renewables is the way forward, and this could be a sustainable, green, and cost-effective way to address the current energy situation. As for Iceland, the aim would inter alia be to showcase the potential of exploiting the geothermal potential for district heating that is widespread on the European continent, but as well as other solutions from our EEA EFTA partners. We will continue to ensure that the EEA EFTA States' participation in relevant EU programs for the current program period, 2021 to 27, is based on the rights and obligations set out in the EEA agreement. This is to continuously remind us all that although that we have incorporated new programs into the agreement, we must always be vigilant and ensure that our rights and obligations are respected. We will also continue work to enhance the synergies between the 3 EFTA organizations based in the EFTA House. Iceland has been adamant that with the coming together under one roof in this House, that synergies, including savings, are ensured in areas such as human resources and IT, and we were indeed pleased to see how all three organizations are working towards this goal. Lastly, negotiations on our financial contributions to the social and economic cohesion in the EEA were kicked off on June 16th. The current framework for the EEA grants, also known as the Eea Financial Mechanism, 2014 to 21 came to an end last year, even if programs can continue for up to 3 years, I think. And according to the relevant protocols, the EEA EFTA States have reviewed the need to continue to address economic and social disparities in the EEA, established that there still is such a need, still exists, and discussions have accordingly started with the EU on a new framework last summer. And of course, we wish to ensure efficiency and continuity on the new fund and parallel processes on trade-related issues, with a view to promoting a continuous and balanced strengthening of trade and economic relations in line with Article 115 of the EEA agreement. Now let me change hats and share some Icelandic perspectives on the EEA agreement, if time permitting, only a few remarks. The agreement is certainly the most significant economic agreement Iceland has entered into. It impacts the everyday life of my countrymen and is the home market for our businesses, accounting for around 72% of our total exports. The agreement covers policy fields under the responsibility of all ministries. Now, such a far-reaching comprehensive relationship requires coordination across our entire national administration and, of course, here in Brussels. And our mission to the EU is indeed Iceland's largest diplomatic mission representation abroad. Our growing presence here in Brussels represents a determined effort by my government to reinforce and improve the management of the agreement and better safeguard and promote Iceland's interests. The key here is that we need to be experts at prioritizing early what is important for Iceland and get our views across when it matters to the right actors and at the right time. We are at the beginning stages involved in Commission committees and working groups, but after that we are not in the Council or in the European Parliament. So from that point of view, we have to work effectively vis-à-vis the EU machinery, build networks and coalitions of like-minded states, engage with the European Parliament, and work closely with the Commission and our EFTA partners. So this is our core task at the mission in relation to the EEA. And the key aspect is, of course, that the system that we are building must be sustainable for the future. The EEA continues to enjoy strong support in Iceland on the side of our government and among the population. The EEA agreement has served us well, and as stated earlier, it is a stable and a predictable framework of relations that brings us closer economically to the EU than any other partner country arrangement. We must continue working at it and indeed never take it for granted. Thank you.